My name is Megan, and at 17, I never imagined my own mother would stand by watching as my stepfather Brandon whipped me with his leather belt. All because I refused to be his precious son Tyler's personal servant. That night, I fled with only $1 in my pocket and the clothes on my back. Mom and Brandon thought they'd broken me, left me with nothing, but they had no idea what awaited me. The secret my father had arranged before his death would change everything. Before I share my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to stand up for yourself against those who should have protected you. He worked as an investment banker, but somehow always managed to be present for every important moment. He'd wake up early to make Mickey Mouse pancakes before school, and spent weekends teaching me to ride bikes and build birdhouses. His laugh was contagious, and he always made me feel like I was the most important person in his world. Mom was different back then too. Sarah Thompson was once a loving, attentive mother who worked as an elementary school teacher. She and Dad had been high school sweethearts, and their love story was the kind I grew up believing I'd find someday. We lived in a modest home in a nice suburb in Connecticut. Nothing extravagant, but comfortable, with a backyard where Dad built me a treehouse that became my secret reading nook. Holidays were filled with traditions and laughter, summers with camping trips and ice cream, and weeknights with homework help and family dinners where we each shared the best part of our day. Everything changed on a rainy Tuesday in October when I was 12. Dad was driving home from work when a truck driver fell asleep at the wheel and crossed the median. The police said he died instantly. I remember Mom collapsing when the officers came to our door, and I stood frozen, unable to process that my father was gone forever. The following months were a blur of grief. Mom took leave from her teaching job, and we both moved through our days like ghosts. The house that once felt warm and safe now echoed with absence. Financial reality hit hard about 6 months after Dad's death. Mom returned to teaching, but her salary alone wasn't enough to maintain our lifestyle. We downsized to a smaller house, and Mom started picking up tutoring jobs on weekends. The stress was visible on her face, new lines around her eyes, gray streaking her once vibrant brown hair. "We'll be okay, Megan," she'd say. But the worry in her voice told a different story. By the time I turned 14, Mom had started dating again. She tried to hide it at first, meeting men for coffee while I was at school, or having dinner dates when I stayed overnight with friends. I understood she was lonely, but part of me felt betrayed. He owned a real estate development company, and lived in one of the affluent neighborhoods nearby. On our first meeting, he brought me a leather-bound journal after Mom mentioned I enjoyed writing. He took us out to fancy restaurants, bought Mom beautiful gifts, and spoke about providing the security we'd lost. He had a son from his previous marriage, Tyler, who was 2 years younger than me. Our first few meetings were awkward but civil. Things moved quickly after that. Within 6 months, Brandon proposed during a weekend trip to Cape Cod. Mom called me, voice bubbling with excitement, to share the news. By summer, we had moved into Brandon's 5-bedroom colonial home, and Mom had become Mrs. Cooper. The facade started cracking almost immediately after the honeymoon. Brandon's attentiveness shifted to control. He had opinions about Mom's clothes, her friends, how she spent her time. "I'm just looking out for my new family," he'd say when I overheard them arguing. Tyler's true personality emerged too. The polite boy from our initial meetings transformed into an entitled, demanding teenager who expected to be catered to. He'd leave messes throughout the house, expecting them to be cleaned up. He'd interrupt conversations, demanding attention, and Brandon indulged every whim. "Boys will be boys," he'd say with a chuckle when Mom timidly suggested Tyler help with chores. The rules in our new home became increasingly one-sided. I was expected to keep my room spotless, maintained straight as the woman who once stood up for me at parent-teacher conferences when a math teacher suggested I wasn't trying hard enough now averted her eyes when Brandon criticized my clothes or my friends. She'd whisper apologies to me in private but never challenge him publicly. "He's providing for us, Megan," she'd say. "We need to make some compromises." Those compromises grew more significant with time. Brandon decided my curfew should be 9 p.m., even on weekends, while Tyler could stay out until 11. I was no longer allowed to participate in after-school activities because I needed to be home to help with dinner. My clothing allowance was cut because Brandon thought my style was too mature, while Tyler got the latest gaming system for getting a C+ in English. Throughout it all, I tried to maintain my relationship with Mom. I'd find moments when Brandon was working late to sit with her, to reminisce about Dad or talk about books like we used to. But these moments grew increasingly rare. Brandon seemed to sense when we were connecting and would inevitably interrupt or create a reason for Mom's attention. By my 16th birthday, the warm, loving home I'd known for the first 12 years of my life had become a distant memory. In its place was a house ruled by a man who saw me as an inconvenience and a mother who no longer had the strength to protect her daughter. As months passed in Brandon's house, the dynamic grew increasingly toxic. What started as unfair rules evolved into something more sinister. Tyler, emboldened by his father's obvious favoritism, began treating me like his personal assistant rather than a stepsister. "Megan, I need a sandwich," he'd call from the living room where he was playing video games. "Make it yourself." When I pointed out that helping each other should work both ways, Brandon would give me that cold smile that never reached his eyes. "Tyler has soccer practice. He needs his energy. You understand." Soon I was expected to clean Tyler's bathroom, help him with homework, despite being in different grades, and even pick out his clothes for special occasions. Meanwhile, my own responsibilities at school were considered secondary. When I made the debate team junior year, something I worked toward for months, Brandon declared I couldn't participate. "The competitions are on weekends and that's family time," he ruled, despite the fact that Tyler's soccer games were also on weekends and the entire family was expected to attend. Mom, who once proudly displayed my academic achievements on the refrigerator, merely looked at her hands when I pleaded for her support. "Brandon is right about family time, honey. Maybe next year." The financial control tightened as well. When I turned 16, I got a part-time job at the local bookstore, hoping to save money and gain some independence. After my first paycheck, Brandon insisted I give him most of my earnings for safekeeping. "You're under our roof eating our food," he reminded me. "You need to contribute." Tyler, meanwhile, received a generous allowance for doing nothing. When he wanted the latest iPhone, Brandon bought it immediately. When I needed new clothes because I'd outgrown mine, I was told to be more careful with my belongings. The only bright spot during this time was my Aunt Jessica, my dad's sister. She lived about an hour away and would call regularly to check on me. Brandon couldn't reasonably forbid these calls, though he'd often hover nearby, listening to my end of the conversation. "How are things really going, Megan?" she'd ask, her voice filled with concern. I became adept at answering in code. Everything's fine meant things were terrible. School is challenging meant Brandon was being particularly difficult. During one visit to her house, which Brandon only allowed because Mom insisted it would look strange to family if I never saw my Aunt Jessica, took me aside. "I don't like what I'm hearing. Megan, your dad would be heartbroken seeing how you're being treated." I broke down then, telling her everything: the favoritism, the chores, the control, the way Mom had changed. Jessica hugged me tightly, her body tense with anger. "If it ever gets worse, you come to me," she said firmly. "No matter what, no matter when. You understand?" I nodded, feeling for the first time that I had an ally. Back at Brandon's house, my relationship with Mom deteriorated further. Every day seemed to be stressful for Brandon, especially where I was concerned. My very presence seemed to irritate him. He'd criticize everything from how loudly I walked up the stairs to how much water I used in the shower. Nothing I did was right while Tyler could do no wrong. The verbal abuse escalated. Ungrateful became Brandon's favorite word to describe me. "After everything we've done for you," he'd say, as if providing basic necessities to your stepdaughter deserved a medal. Tyler, learning from his father, began his own campaign of torment. He'd deliberately mess up areas I just cleaned. He'd make comments about my appearance, calling me boring and plain compared to the girls at his school. Once he even accidentally spilled soda on my history project, forcing me to redo hours of work overnight. When I complained to Mom, her response cut deeper than anything Brandon or Tyler could say. "He's the man of the house now, Megan. We need to adjust. Your father would want us to be taken care of." I wanted to scream that Dad would be horrified by how Brandon treated us, that he'd never have expected Mom to sacrifice her daughter's well-being for financial security. But the mention of Dad seemed to create a wall around Mom, one I couldn't breach. My world shrank as Brandon systematically cut off my connections outside the house. Friends stopped calling after Brandon was consistently rude to them on the phone. Invitations to social events were declined because they interfered with family obligations. Even my favorite English teacher, Ms. Lawson, who had taken a special interest in my writing, was pushed away when Brandon complained to the principal that she was showing favoritism by offering to mentor me after school. By winter of my junior year, I had become a shadow in my own life. My grades remained excellent, but only because academic success was my one remaining escape. I wrote stories in the journal Brandon had given me when we first met. Stories about girls who escaped controlling homes and found freedom. Those stories hidden beneath my mattress kept me going. The one person who noticed the change in me was the school counselor. Something in her kind eyes broke through my carefully constructed wall. I didn't tell her everything, but I shared enough. The unequal treatment, the isolation, Mom's withdrawal. Reynolds listened without judgment. This sounds like an emotionally abusive situation, she said carefully. There are resources that can help. She gave me some pamphlets, which I carefully hid in my backpack. But somehow, Brandon found them that evening while I was helping Mom with dinner. The confrontation that followed was explosive. "You're spreading lies about this family," he shouted, waving the pamphlets in my face. "After everything we've done for you?" Mom stood by, wringing her hands. "Megan, how could you? Brandon worked so hard for this family." That night, Brandon came into my room, closing the door behind him. He didn't yell this time, which was somehow more frightening. "If you ever talk to that counselor again about our private family matters, there will be consequences," he said, his voice eerily calm. Reynolds caused Brandon to tighten his control even further. He began checking my phone randomly, reading my text messages and monitoring my calls. Tyler's 15th birthday marked a new low in my servitude. Brandon planned an elaborate party with 30 of Tyler's friends, and I was essentially treated as the help. I was expected to set up decorations, serve food, clean up messes, and stay entirely in the background. "Don't embarrass Tyler in front of his friends," Brandon warned me beforehand. For 6 hours, I convinced Mom I needed to visit Aunt Jessica to discuss a school project about family history. Reluctantly, Brandon agreed. His one weakness was maintaining appearances with extended family. During that visit, I confided everything to Jessica. Her face grew increasingly troubled as I spoke. "This isn't right, Megan," she said firmly. "None of this is right." She gave me a key to her house and made me memorize her address and phone number, just in case. "Day or night, you call me if things get worse. You come here if you need to." Back at Brandon's house, I created a small emergency bag. A change of clothes, my most important documents, the journal with my stories, and a photo of Dad. I hid it in the back of my closet, hoping I'd never need it but feeling safer knowing it was there. The final straw came when I overheard Brandon and Mom discussing my college fund, the money Dad had set aside for my education before he died. "Tyler's private school tuition is increasing next year," Brandon was saying. "We should consider using some of Megan's college money. She can get scholarships or loans." "But Michael specifically saved that for her," Mom said, showing a rare moment of backbone. "She's living under our roof for free, Sarah. Tyler needs this opportunity more." Spring of junior year brought new tensions to the household. Tyler, emboldened by his father's constant endorsement, became increasingly demanding. What started as requests for sandwiches evolved into expectations that I would complete his school assignments, clean his room weekly, and essentially function as his personal assistant. "Megan, I need you to type up my English essay," he announced one afternoon, tossing a crumpled paper with barely legible handwriting onto my desk where I was studying for an AP exam. "I'm preparing for a test, Tyler. Type it yourself," I replied, trying to keep my voice neutral. His face twisted into that familiar smirk. "Dad says you need to help me succeed. I have practice in an hour." This had become our routine dance. I would attempt to establish a reasonable boundary, Tyler would threaten to involve Brandon, and eventually, I would comply to avoid the explosive aftermath. That day, however, something in me refused to bend. "I'm not doing your homework for you," That's cheating, and it won't help you learn anything. 20 minutes later, Brandon stormed into my room without knocking. What's this about refusing to help your brother? He demanded, looming over my desk. Stepbrother. I corrected automatically, immediately regretting it when I saw the flash in his eyes. This ungrateful attitude stops now, Brandon hissed. While you live under my roof, you will contribute to this family. Tyler has important athletic commitments that could lead to scholarships. Your studying can wait. My AP exam is tomorrow, I tried explaining. I've been preparing for months. Brandon's laugh was cold. Always about you, isn't it, Megan? Your mother and I provide everything for you. And you can't even help your brother with one simple assignment. In the doorway, Mom hovered like a pale ghost. Megan, please. Just help Tyler this once. The betrayal stung more than Brandon's words. This once had become every day, and Mom knew it. That night, I typed Tyler's paper while he played video games downstairs, laughing with his friends over his headset about how his slave stepsister was doing his work. Back me into corners while making his points, or grip my shoulder just a little too tightly when giving fatherly advice. One evening, after I'd forgotten to pick up his dry cleaning because I was finishing a lab report, Brandon slammed his fist on the table so hard that dishes jumped and a glass toppled over. He discovered fear was an effective tool. At school, my transformation didn't go unnoticed. Ms. Reynolds, the counselor who had tried to help before, stopped me in the hallway between classes. My door is always open, Megan, she said quietly. Whatever you're going through, you don't have to face it alone. I nodded but kept walking. Brandon's warning about consequences echoed too loudly in my mind. My only real lifeline remained Aunt Jessica. Our phone calls were now monitored, but we developed a system of coded messages. While Mom and Brandon attended one of Tyler's soccer tournaments, Aunt Jessica pressed a prepaid phone into my hands. Keep this hidden, she whispered. Call me anytime, day or night, if you need help. I mean it, Megan. No matter what. That small flip phone, hidden inside a hollowed-out copy of Jane Eyre on my bookshelf, gave me a sense of security I hadn't felt in years. The breaking point approached with Tyler's end-of-year school awards ceremony. Despite maintaining mediocre grades, taking photos and loudly celebrating his son's achievement. That same week I received my AP exam results. 5 perfect scores. There was no celebration, no acknowledgement. Passing Brandon the salt before he even asked for it. Later that night, I overheard them in their bedroom. Megan's test results. Shouldn't we do something to recognize her achievement? Mom suggested timidly. She's just good at memorizing facts, Brandon dismissed. Tyler's improvement shows real character growth. Besides, claiming it was financially responsible. When I mentioned scholarship opportunities at more distant universities, he shut down the conversation. I came home from my bookstore job to find Brandon sitting at the kitchen table with my laptop open in front of him. What are you doing? I asked, stomach-dropping. Checking your college applications, he replied unapologetically. I see you've been ignoring my guidance. NYU? Columbia? Boston University? These are completely impractical. I earned those application fee waivers through my test scores, I defended. And I qualify for significant financial aid. Brandon's face darkened. You're not leaving this family, Megan. Your mother needs you here. Behind him, Mom was stirring something on the stove, her back deliberately turned to our confrontation. Mom! I appealed to her directly. Don't you want me to go to the best school I can get into? Dad always said. Don't you dare use your father to manipulate your mother. Brandon cut in. Standing so abruptly his chair scraped loudly against the floor. Your father isn't here. I am. And in this house we make decisions as a family, my family. That night, he changed all my application passwords and informed me that he would be reviewing my college options moving forward. The final weeks of junior year passed in a haze of tension and silent resentment. Summer arrived with new expectations. While Tyler enjoyed freedom and a schedule full of activities with friends, I was assigned increased household responsibilities and additional hours at the bookstore, with Brandon still claiming most of my paycheck for expenses. The only bright spot was a secret meeting with Aunt Jessica at the mall, orchestrated during a rare afternoon off. She bought me ice cream and listened as I shared my growing fears about senior year in college. He can't actually stop you from leaving once you're 18, she reminded me. And I'll help however I can. Mom won't stand up to him, I said, the reality of it still painful to admit. She's chosen her side. Jessica's eyes filled with sadness. Your mother is making terrible choices, but I believe she's also afraid, Megan. That doesn't excuse her failure to protect you. But fear does strange things to people. As summer drew to a close, I began mentally preparing for my senior year, my last year under Brandon's roof. I had a countdown app hidden on the prepaid phone from Aunt Jessica, tracking days until my 18th birthday, which meant she was probably working late at school for parent conferences. Brandon's SUV was missing too, but Tyler's beat-up Jeep, a 16th birthday gift from his father, was parked haphazardly near the garage. I headed straight to my room, grateful for the temporary peace. I had a physics test to study for and a mountain of calculus homework to complete. The quiet felt like a gift after weeks of constant tension. I had just spread my textbooks across my desk when the door burst open without a knock. Tyler stood in the doorway, his 6-foot frame blocking the exit, a familiar entitled expression on his face. I need dinner, he announced, as if speaking to a servant rather than a person. I didn't even look up from my physics notes. There's leftover lasagna in the fridge. Heat it up. Tyler made an exaggerated sound of disgust. I don't want leftovers. Make me something fresh. I have a physics test tomorrow, I replied, still not meeting his gaze. I need to study. The familiar pattern was unfolding exactly as it had countless times before: Tyler's demand, my refusal, his eventual appeal to his father's authority. But something was different this time. Perhaps it was the college essays I'd been working on, reminding me that escape was within reach. Perhaps it was simply the accumulation of months of mistreatment finally reaching critical mass. Whatever the reason, I felt a rare surge of defiance. I'm not your personal chef, Tyler, I said, finally looking up at him. You're 15 years old. Make your own dinner. His face contorted with shock and then rage. No one in the house spoke to precious Tyler that way anymore. You'll regret this, he sputtered before stomping down the hallway. I returned to my physics notes, heart pounding but resolute. This small act of defiance felt monumental after years of compliance. 20 minutes later, I heard the front door slam and Brandon's heavy footsteps on the stairs. Tyler must have called him. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the confrontation to come. Brandon didn't bother knocking either. The door flew open so forcefully it bounced against the wall, leaving a small dent from the doorknob. What the hell do you think you're doing? He demanded, his face already flushed with anger. I swiveled in my chair to face him, fighting to keep my voice steady. Studying for my physics test. Don't play dumb with me, Brandon sneered. Tyler called me. Says you refused to make him dinner. I told him there's leftover lasagna in the fridge, I explained calmly. I have a test tomorrow that I need to prepare for. Brandon stepped further into my room, my small sanctuary that suddenly felt claustrophobic. Your responsibilities in this household come before your homework. We've been over this. I should have backed down then. Every instinct honed over 3 years of living under Brandon's rules screamed at me to apologize and comply. But something had shifted inside me. I'm a student, not a servant, I said quietly but firmly. And I won't be treated like one anymore. The silence that followed felt charged, like the air before lightning strikes. Before I could respond, Mom appeared in the doorway, still in her teaching clothes, looking confused and alarmed. What's going on? She asked, glancing between us. Your daughter has decided she's above helping this family, Brandon said without taking his eyes off me. She refused to make Tyler dinner and now she's being insolent. Mom's gaze fell on me. His fingers dug into my arm hard enough to leave bruises. I tried to pull away, but his grip only tightened. Brandon, please, Mom said weakly from the doorway. She has a test. Stay out of this, Sarah, he snapped without looking at her. This has been coming for a long time. He dragged me across the hallway to his and Mom's bedroom, shoving me inside ahead of him. Tyler appeared in the hallway, a smirk playing on his lips as he watched. You need to learn respect, Brandon announced. In all the years of emotional abuse and control, Brandon had never struck me. The threats had always been implicit rather than explicit. "You can't do this," I said, backing away until I hit the edge of the bed. "I'm 17. This is assault." Brandon laughed, a cold sound devoid of humor. "This is parenting. Something you've clearly been lacking." I looked desperately to Mom, who stood frozen in the doorway, her face pale with shock but her body motionless. "Mom, please," I begged. "Don't let him do this." A flicker of something, recognition, shame, conflict, passed across her features. For a moment I thought she might intervene, might finally become the mother I remembered from before Dad died. Instead, she lowered her eyes and stepped back from the doorway. "You've pushed him to this, Megan," she whispered. "Just apologize." The last thread of hope I had for her protection snapped in that moment. I was truly alone. Brandon doubled the belt in his fist. "Turn around," he ordered. When I didn't move, paralyzed by disbelief and fear, he grabbed my shoulder and spun me around, pushing me face down onto the bed. The first strike of the belt came without warning, a searing line of fire across my back that tore a cry from my throat. The second followed immediately, then a third and fourth in rapid succession. I buried my face in the comforter, determined not to give Tyler, watching from the doorway, the satisfaction of seeing me sob. I don't know how many times the belt fell. 6, 10. The physical pain blurred with the emotional agony of Mom's betrayal and my own helplessness. Eventually Brandon stopped, breathing heavily from the exertion. "Let that be a lesson," he said, voice ragged. "In this house you will respect my authority and do as you're told. Is that clear?" I didn't answer. Couldn't answer through the tears I was fighting to contain. "Is that clear?" he repeated, raising the belt again. "Yes," I managed to whisper, the word tasting like ash. "Good." I pushed myself up from the bed, every movement sending fresh waves of pain across my back. I walked past Mom without looking at her, past Tyler whose smug satisfaction made me nauseous. I locked myself in the bathroom instead of going to the kitchen, turning on the shower to mask the sound of my sobs. Under the hot water I examined the damage in the small mirror. Angry red welts crisscrossed my back, some already darkening to bruises. The physical pain was intense, but nothing compared to the final shattering of any illusion that my mother would protect me. As the water ran cold, clarity emerged through the pain and shock. I couldn't stay. Not one more night. Not one more hour than necessary. When Brandon's snores echoed from the master bedroom and Tyler's light finally went out, moving quietly despite my throbbing back, I retrieved the emergency bag I prepared months ago from the back of my closet. I added a few essentials: my school ID, the remaining cash from my last paycheck that I'd managed to hide from Brandon, the prepaid phone from Aunt Jessica. A search of my wallet revealed just $1. Brandon had taken the rest of my money, for safekeeping, after my last shift at the bookstore. $1 to start my new life. The irony wasn't lost on me. I considered taking more from the house, something I could sell perhaps, or cash from Mom's purse, but couldn't bring myself to become a thief even after everything. Instead, I wrote a brief note and left it on my pillow. "I won't be your servant or punching bag anymore. Don't look for me." With one last glance at the bedroom that had been my prison for 3 years, I slipped out the window and disappeared into the night. The September night air felt cool against my skin as I carefully closed the window behind me. The rational part of my brain screamed that I was being impulsive, that I should wait until morning, that running away at midnight was dangerous for a 17-year-old girl. But the welts on my back throbbed with each movement, silencing those doubts. Aunt Jessica lived in Millfield, nearly 7 miles away. Under normal circumstances I might have called a rideshare, but my $1 wouldn't get me far. And I couldn't risk using my regular phone which Brandon monitored. Walking was my only option. I oriented myself toward the main road, wincing as my backpack rubbed against the fresh welts. The weight of what I was doing, leaving home in the middle of the night with almost nothing, should have terrified me. Instead, each step away from Brandon's house felt like shedding a heavy chain I'd been dragging for years. The first mile passed in tense silence, my senses hyper-alert for any sign of pursuit. By mile 2, my initial adrenaline began to fade, replaced by the reality of physical discomfort. My back burning, blisters forming on my heels, the September night growing chillier than I'd anticipated. At the corner of Maple and Highland, I passed the 24-hour convenience store where Tyler and his friends often bought energy drinks before school. On impulse, I ducked inside, partly to warm up and partly to use the bathroom. The cashier, a middle-aged man with tired eyes, barely glanced up from his magazine as I entered. In the harsh fluorescent lighting of the bathroom, readjusted my backpack to minimize contact with my injured back, and continued my journey. By mile 4, doubts began to creep in. What if Aunt Jessica wasn't home? What if she'd changed her mind about helping me? What if Brandon found me before I reached safety? Each anxious thought pushed me to walk faster despite my growing fatigue. It was nearly 3 in the morning when I finally turned onto Jessica's street. Her modest 2-bedroom house had never looked more welcoming. A porch light glowed softly, as if she'd somehow known I would come. With trembling hands, I retrieved the key she'd given me months ago and approached the front door. Before I could insert it into the lock, the door swung open, revealing Aunt Jessica in a bathrobe, her face tight with concern. "Megan," she whispered, eyes widening as she took in my disheveled appearance. "What happened? Are you okay?" The simple kindness in her voice broke something inside me. After hours of walking alone in the dark, holding myself together through sheer determination, I collapsed into her arms, but her hands remained gentle as she guided me inside and closed the door firmly behind us. "Let me see," she said, her voice controlled but trembling slightly with fury. In the safety of her kitchen, I turned and lifted the back of my shirt. Jessica's sharp intake of breath told me all I needed to know about how bad it looked. "That bastard," she whispered. "I'm calling the police." "No," I protested, panic rising. "He'll just deny it, or say I deserved it. Mom will back him up." "Megan, this is abuse. Clear-cut child abuse," Jessica insisted, already reaching for her phone. "Please," I begged. "Not tonight. I just need to sleep. I've been walking for hours." Jessica hesitated. "And you're not going back to that house. Not ever." She led me to her guest room, bringing me a soft t-shirt to sleep in and some ibuprofen for the pain. As I sank into the clean sheets of a bed that didn't feel like a prison, the enormity of what I'd done hit me. I'd run away, left everything familiar behind. My future was a complete unknown. What if he comes looking for me? I asked Jessica as she turned to leave. Her expression hardened. "Let him try. You're safe here, Megan. Promise." I fell into an exhausted sleep almost immediately, my body surrendering to fatigue once it recognized safety. When I woke, sunlight was streaming through unfamiliar curtains, and for a moment, I didn't remember where I was. Then the pain in my back flared as I shifted, and everything came rushing back. The digital clock on the nightstand read 10:37 a.m. I'd missed my first 3 classes, including the physics test I'd been studying for when everything imploded. I found Jessica in the kitchen, already dressed for the day, her laptop open on the table in front of her. She looked up when I entered, relief washing over her face. "How are you feeling?" she asked, immediately pouring me a cup of coffee. "Sore," I admitted, "but better than last night." Jessica nodded, her expression serious. "Your mother has called my cell phone 6 times this morning. Brandon twice." My stomach clenched. "What did you tell them?" "Nothing yet." She glanced at the screen and her lips tightened. "It's your mother." Part of me wanted to grab the phone, to hear Mom's voice, to believe she was calling because she was worried about me rather than concerned about Brandon's reaction to my absence. But the memory of her standing in the doorway, watching as her husband struck her daughter, was still too raw. "I don't want to talk to her," I said firmly. Jessica declined the call and set the phone aside. "That's your choice, and I respect it, but we still need to address what happened." Over the next hour, Jessica gently but thoroughly documented my injuries, photographing the welts and bruises that had darkened overnight, writing down my account of the incident, and researching our options. As a teacher herself, she was a mandatory reporter of child abuse, a fact she reminded me of gently. "If you walked into my classroom with these injuries and told me what happened, I would be legally obligated to report it," she explained. "This isn't just about what you want anymore, Megan. It's about your safety and the law." By noon we'd reached a compromise. Jessica would report the incident to Child Protective Services, but we would wait to involve the police directly, giving me some time to process everything. She also contacted the school to explain my absence, speaking vaguely about a family emergency that would keep me out for a few days. Just as we finished lunch, a knock at the door made me freeze mid-bite. Jessica's eyes met mine, and she placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "Stay here," she instructed, moving to answer the door. From the kitchen, I could hear the low murmur of voices, then Jessica's tone becoming increasingly firm. Curiosity overcame fear, and I crept to the hallway, peering around the corner. Pointing at me over Jessica's shoulder, "Officers, that's my stepdaughter who ran away last night. We've been worried sick." Mom stepped forward, her face pale and drawn. "Megan, honey, please come home. We can work this out." Jessica moved to block their view of me. Megan is 17 years old and chose to leave an abusive situation. She's safe here with her aunt. One of the officers, a woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense expression, turned to Jessica. "Ma'am, we received a report of a runaway minor. We're obligated to investigate." "Of course. Would you like to see the photographs of the welts on her back from where her stepfather beat her with a belt last night?" Brandon's expression darkened. "That's ridiculous." What followed was one of the most difficult hours of my life. In Jessica's living room, I showed the officers my injuries, explained the events of the previous night. The male officer stepped outside to speak with Brandon and Mom while the female officer stayed behind. "What happens now?" I asked her, my voice small. "We'll file a report with CPS." Jessica nodded firmly. "Absolutely. As long as she needs." The officer turned back to me. "You should know your parents can file for a custody hearing." When the officers finally left, Brandon's parting words echoed in my ears. A hissed, "This isn't over," as he guided my tearful mother to their car. That night, after the emotional exhaustion of the day, I sat on the guest bed that was now temporarily mine, staring at the prepaid phone Jessica had given me months ago. I had used it to call the bookstore where I worked, explaining that I couldn't come in for my scheduled shifts due to a family emergency. Mr. Peterson, the kind owner who had always treated me with respect, assured me my job would be waiting when I was ready to return. My regular phone had been blowing up with messages from Brandon, Mom, and even Tyler, ranging from concerned to accusatory to threatening. I had powered it off shortly after arriving at Jessica's, unable to deal with the emotional manipulation. CPS conducted a formal interview, and I was assigned a caseworker named Diana, who helped us navigate the legal complexities of my situation. A week after my escape, Mom called Jessica's landline, catching me when my aunt was out grocery shopping. "Megan, please," she began, her voice breaking. "Come home. Brandon has promised he won't touch you again. He was just stressed about work and lost his temper." "He beat me with a belt, Mom," I replied, my voice steadier than I expected. "And you watched." The silence on the other end spoke volumes. "He's your husband," I continued. "I understand your loyalty to him, but I'm your daughter. You were supposed to protect me." "I am protecting you," she insisted weakly. "He'll press charges against Jessica for harboring a runaway," Mom threatened, a note of desperation entering her voice. "The police have already determined I'm not a runaway," I reminded her. I had spoken my truth directly to my mother and stood firm in my decision. The next day, Jessica and I met with the school counselor to discuss my options for completing senior year. Given the circumstances, they agreed to a flexible arrangement where I would attend some classes in person and complete others remotely, allowing me to avoid potential confrontations with Brandon during pickup times. As weeks passed, I settled into my new life at Aunt Jessica's. The physical welts healed faster than the emotional wounds, but slowly, I began to rediscover parts of myself that had been suppressed under Brandon's roof. I rejoined the debate team. My caseworker helped me obtain a restraining order against Brandon after he showed up at the bookstore demanding to speak with me, causing such a scene that Mr. Peterson had to call the police. Mom made one final attempt at reconciliation, meeting me for coffee at a neutral location without Brandon present. She looked thinner, older, her once vibrant energy dimmed by worry. "I miss you," she said simply. I miss who you used to be, I replied. We sat in silence for several minutes before she spoke again. I should have stopped him. It was the closest thing to an acknowledgement of her failure that I'd received. Part of me wanted to leap across the table and hug her, to forgive everything instantly. But the larger part, figure out why you let it happen. Mom nodded slowly, her hands wrapped tightly around her coffee cup. And then we'll see, I said, unwilling to make promises I wasn't sure I could keep. As I walked away from that meeting, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Not since before Dad died and our world collapsed. Freedom was worth far more. 3 months after my escape from Brandon's house, life had settled into a new rhythm. I was adapting to my new school arrangement, splitting time between in-person classes and remote learning. My grades had remained strong despite the upheaval. The restraining order against him had been extended after he made several attempts to approach me at school events. Mom and I maintained limited contact through occasional text messages and bi-weekly coffee meetings. Our relationship remained fragile, a delicate reconstruction that might never fully resemble what we once had. She continued living with Brandon but had started seeing a therapist, a small step that gave me cautious hope. She asked, lingering in the doorway. I looked up from my laptop where I'd been working on an English essay. Just finishing this paper. Why? There's someone I'd like you to meet, she said carefully. An appointment I've scheduled for us at 11. Her mysterious tone piqued my curiosity. Who are we meeting? Jessica sat on the edge of my bed, absently smoothing the comforter. Your father's lawyer, Mr. Campbell. I stared at her, confused. Dad's lawyer? Why would we meet with him now? It's been 5 years since Dad died. I've been waiting for the right time, and with everything settling down a bit, I think that time is now. My mind raced with questions, but Jessica was clearly not ready to elaborate further. We sat in the tastefully appointed office of Campbell and Associates in downtown Millfield. The reception area featured dark wood paneling and leather chairs that seemed designed to convey stability and trustworthiness. A silver-haired receptionist offered us water while we waited for Mr. Campbell. Jessica Thompson, a deep voice called from a doorway. It's been too long. A tall man in his 60s with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses approached us with his hand extended. At your father's funeral. You look so much like him. The unexpected connection to Dad sent a wave of emotion through me. I managed a polite handshake as Mr. Campbell led us into his office, a space lined with law books and family photographs. Please sit, he invited, gesturing to the chairs across from his desk. Jessica has informed me about your current situation, Megan. I want to express my condolences for the difficulties you've experienced. I nodded, unsure how to respond to this stranger who somehow knew intimate details of my life. Mr. Campbell removed a file from his desk drawer and placed it carefully before him. Michael Thompson was not just my client but my friend. We went to law school together. Megan. He believed in planning for every contingency, including ones he hoped would never materialize. My heart began to beat faster as Mr. Campbell continued. When you were born, your father established a trust fund for your education and future security. This was separate from the life insurance policy that went to your mother after his death. I glanced at Aunt Jessica, who nodded encouragingly. The trust was structured in a very specific way, Mr. Campbell explained. I was named as trustee. He slid a document across the desk toward me. This trust currently holds approximately $850,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. I stared at the document, unable to process what I was seeing. 850,000? I repeated, certain I'd misheard. Your father made some excellent investments, Mr. Campbell explained, and the portfolio has performed exceptionally well in the years since his passing. My mind reeled with implications. But Mom always said we were struggling financially after Dad died. That's why she married Brandon so quickly, for security. A look passed between Jessica and Mr. Campbell, a silent communication that didn't escape my notice. Your mother was aware of the life insurance policy, which paid out $500,000, Mr. Campbell said carefully. However, Michael instructed me not to inform her of this separate trust until you turned 18 or circumstances necessitated earlier disclosure. The revelation landed like a thunderbolt. Mom doesn't know about this money? No, Mr. Campbell confirmed. Your father had concerns about Sarah's financial judgment. He loved her deeply, but he wanted to ensure your education and future were protected, regardless of what choices she might make after his death. Jessica reached for my hand. Your dad was incredibly smart, Megan. He didn't anticipate Brandon specifically, but he worried that your mom might remarry someone who wouldn't prioritize your needs. So all this time, I began. But I was bound by his instructions not to tell you until you were older. When you came to me that night 3 months ago, I realized it might be time, but I wanted you to settle in first. Approaching legal adulthood, I believe we're justified in initiating early access procedures. You turn 18 in April, correct? I nodded, still stunned. The trust allows for educational expenses to be paid directly to institutions prior to your 18th birthday, he explained. This means your college tuition and related costs can be covered regardless of when you turn 18. After your birthday, the trust transitions to your control, with some structured disbursements to ensure long-term security. For several minutes, I sat in silence, processing this dramatic shift in my understanding of my situation. All those years of Brandon's financial control, of being told I was a burden, of having my college fund threatened, and all along I had resources beyond anything I'd imagined. Does this mean? I started, then paused to collect my thoughts. Does this mean I can really go to any college I get accepted to, without worrying about money? Mr. Campbell smiled warmly. That's exactly what your father intended, Megan. He wanted you to pursue your education without limitations. Jessica said softly. Tell her about the letter, Richard. Mr. Campbell nodded and withdrew an envelope from the file, handing it to me with reverence. Your father left this for you, to be delivered when you learned about the trust. The envelope bore my name and Dad's distinctive handwriting. With trembling fingers, I opened it and began to read. Asterisk, my dearest Megan. Asterisk. Asterisk, if you're reading this, it means I'm no longer there to tell you in person how enormously proud I am of you. I hope this letter finds you thriving. Education was always important to me, as you know, and I want you to have every opportunity to learn, grow, and build the life you desire. Asterisk. Asterisk, I don't know what circumstances have led to you receiving this letter earlier than your 18th birthday. I pray your mother has continued to be the loving parent I've always known her to be. But if circumstances have changed, please know this. You are never alone. Your strength comes from within, but support can be found in places you might not expect. Like with your Aunt Jessica, who promised me she would always look out for you. Asterisk. Asterisk, use these resources wisely, not just for education but for building a life that brings you joy. That's all I've ever wanted for you. Asterisk. All my love always, Dad. By the time I finished reading, tears streamed freely down my face. Jessica moved her chair closer, wrapping an arm around my shoulders as I cried. Not just for the father I'd lost, but for the incredible foresight and love he'd demonstrated. When I finally composed myself, Mr. Campbell outlined the next steps. We would meet with a financial advisor the following week to discuss management of the trust once I turned 18. In the meantime, he would begin the process of allocating funds for college deposits as my acceptance letters arrived. As we left the office, the December air felt different, somehow crisper, fuller with possibility. Jessica and I walked in comfortable silence for a block before I spoke. You've known about this the whole time? I asked, not accusingly but curiously. Jessica nodded. Your dad made me promise not to tell you until the right time. He was concerned that if Sarah remarried, her new husband might try to access these funds. Like Brandon would have, I acknowledged. We reached Jessica's car and paused before getting in. Why didn't you tell me sooner? After I came to live with you. Jessica leaned against the car, considering her answer carefully. You were dealing with so much trauma, Megan. I wanted you to heal, to find your footing based on your own strength, not suddenly feel dependent on this inheritance. I wanted you to know you could survive on your own before learning you didn't have to. Her reasoning made sense and somehow made the revelation even more meaningful. I'd found my independence, my voice, my boundaries, and now I was discovering I had the resources to truly build the future I wanted. The following week brought another meeting, this time with a financial advisor named Ms. Patel, who walked me through the structure of the trust, investment strategies, and how to manage such a significant sum responsibly. She helped me understand the mechanics of college funding and how the trust would transition to my control upon turning 18. Your father built in some wise restrictions, Ms. Patel explained. Rather than receiving the full amount at once, you'll get quarterly disbursements and have access to larger sums for specific purposes like education, housing, or starting a business. The thick envelope contained not just an offer of admission, but also consideration for merit scholarships. The irony wasn't lost on me. Even without knowing about the trust, news of my trust fund eventually reached Mom and Brandon, though I never told them directly. Mom called one evening, her voice tight with emotion. "Is it true?" she asked without preamble. "About Michael's trust fund for you?" "Yes," I answered simply. A long pause followed. Why didn't he tell me? The hurt in her voice was genuine, but I had no comforting answer to offer. I think he wanted to make sure I'd be okay no matter what. "Brandon says we should contest it," she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "He says as your mother." The fact that Brandon's first reaction is to try to take it, doesn't that tell you something? Another long silence followed. "I don't know what to believe anymore," she finally admitted. A rare moment of vulnerability. "Believe that Dad loved us," I said gently. "And he wanted to make sure I could go to college and build my own life. That's all." After we hung up, I sat on my bed, staring at the college acceptance letters pinned to my bulletin board. The knowledge of the trust fund hadn't fundamentally changed who I was or what I wanted. In reality, I'd always had something far more valuable waiting for me. A future secured by a father whose love extended beyond his lifetime. By the time spring arrived, bringing fresh blooms to Aunt Jessica's garden, I had developed a new understanding of healing. It wasn't a straight line toward wholeness but rather a winding path with unexpected setbacks and surprising moments of growth. The physical welts from Brandon's belt had long since faded, but the emotional scars required more time and intentional care. At Jessica's suggestion, I began seeing Dr. Winters, a therapist specializing in trauma and family dynamics. Our weekly sessions became a sacred space where I could untangle the complex emotions surrounding my mother's betrayal, Brandon's abuse, and my father's posthumous protection. "Healing doesn't mean forgetting," Dr. Winters explained during one particularly difficult session. "It means the pain no longer controls your choices." Those words resonated deeply as I worked through layers of anger, grief, and confusion. Some days brought clarity and strength. Others left me emotionally exhausted. But gradually, I reclaimed pieces of myself that had been suppressed during those years in Brandon's house: my voice, my boundaries, my right to safety and respect. School provided another avenue for healing. After the flexible arrangement during those first tumultuous months, I returned to full-time in-person attendance for my final semester of senior year. The restraining order against Brandon remained in effect, preventing him from attending school events, which allowed me to fully participate in senior activities without fear. Ms. Reynolds, the counselor who had first noticed my distress, became a valuable ally. She helped me navigate the academic and social challenges of returning mid-year, and ensured teachers understood my situation without sharing unnecessary details. "You're one of the strongest students I've ever worked with," she told me during our final counseling session. "Not just academically but personally. The resilience you've shown is remarkable." I didn't feel remarkable most days, just determined to create a different future than the one Brandon had tried to force upon me. But these affirmations from adults I respected helped counter the years of being told I was ungrateful, difficult, and unworthy. As graduation approached, college decisions solidified. After careful consideration of my options, I chose Boston University, far enough from home to establish true independence but close enough that Jessica could visit occasionally. The trust fund my father had established covered tuition, housing, and living expenses, removing the financial stress that burdens many college students. Mr. The kitchen table held a chocolate cake with blue frosting, my favorite since childhood, and 18 candles that flickered hopefully in the dimmed light. "Make a wish," Jessica encouraged as I prepared to blow out the candles. I closed my eyes, thinking not of material desires but of intangible hopes, for continued healing, for wisdom in my choices. After my friends had gone home, Jessica presented me with a small gift box. "This isn't from me," she explained as I unwrapped it. "Your dad left it with Mr." I recognized it immediately. I'd admired it in a jewelry store window during a father-daughter shopping trip when I was 11. Dad had distracted me with ice cream, apparently returning later to purchase it as a future gift. "He knew how much you loved reading and writing," Jessica said softly as she helped me fasten it around my neck. "He always said you had stories to tell." The necklace became a talisman of sorts, a physical reminder of the father who had loved me so completely that he'd planned for my 18th birthday, even while facing his own mortality. My relationship with Mom remained complicated. Our coffee meetings continued, sometimes productive and connecting, other times strained and distant. She remained with Brandon, though subtle changes in her demeanor suggested growing recognition of the toxicity in their relationship. "Tyler's going to a military academy in the fall," she informed me during one of our meetings in May. Brandon's idea. Apparently, his grades weren't good enough for the colleges he wanted. I resisted the urge to point out that Tyler's grades might have been better if he'd done his own homework instead of demanding I do it for him. Instead, I simply nodded, noting the hint of skepticism in Mom's voice regarding Brandon's decision. "How are your college plans coming along?" she asked. "I've been assigned a roommate who's studying psychology too." Mom nodded, her eyes growing misty. "I wish," she began, then stopped herself. "What do you wish, Mom?" I prompted gently. "I wish I could have helped you with all of this," she admitted. "Dorm shopping, roommate discussions, all the things mothers and daughters are supposed to do together." The acknowledgement of her absence from these milestone moments hung between us. I could have responded with anger or accusation, reminding her that her choices had created this distance. Instead, I opted for honesty without cruelty. "Jessica's helping me with the practical stuff," I said. "But there's still time for you to be involved if you want to be." Mom reached across the table. But I was learning that healing sometimes required offering small openings while maintaining firm boundaries. Graduation day arrived with perfect June weather, sunshine warming the football field where chairs had been arranged in neat rows for the ceremony. Jessica sat in the audience, proudly holding a bouquet of yellow roses. Mom had asked to attend as well, coming alone while Brandon remained conspicuously absent. As I crossed the stage to receive my diploma, the principal's announcement echoed through the sound system. "Megan Thompson, graduating with highest honors and recipient of the Boston University Academic Excellence Scholarship." The applause that followed included Jessica's enthusiastic cheering, and I noticed with surprise, my mother's tearful standing ovation. Winters provided strategies for managing the transition to university life and continuing my healing journey in a new environment. In July, I took a significant step toward independence by signing a lease for my first apartment near the Boston University campus. Though dormitory housing was available, the trust fund afforded me the option of a small one-bedroom unit, where I could establish my own safe space without the potential triggers of shared living. He always valued independence tempered with responsibility. As August approached and my departure for Boston loomed, the direct acknowledgement caught me off guard. For months, our interactions had danced around this central truth, approaching it obliquely but never confronting it head-on. "I was so afraid of being alone after your father died," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "I convinced myself that any family was better than no family. That financial security justified everything else." She looked up, meeting my eyes directly. "I was wrong, Megan. So terribly wrong." "Yes," I agreed, neither accusatory nor forgiving, simply acknowledging the truth we both knew. "I don't expect you to forgive me," Mom said, twisting her napkin in her hands. "But I wanted you to know that I see it now, what I did, what I allowed to happen. And I'm sorry. More sorry than I can ever express." The apology I'd longed for during those dark nights in Brandon's house now arrived as I prepared to leave for college. Its timing felt both belated and perfectly aligned with my journey forward. "What happens now?" I asked, not just about our relationship but about her life with Brandon. Mom took a deep breath. "I'm taking it one day at a time. Brandon doesn't know I'm in therapy. He wouldn't approve." The hesitation in her voice revealed volumes about their continuing dynamic. You deserve better too. We parted with a careful hug. Not the unreserved embrace of our past relationship, but not the cold distance of recent months either. Something new was forming between us. Tentative and fragile but rooted in truth rather than pretense. My final confrontation with Brandon came unexpectedly, just days before my departure for Boston. I was working my last shift at the bookstore, having given notice that I'd be leaving for college. The afternoon had been busy with back-to-school shoppers, his imposing frame blocking the exit. Despite the restraining order, he had somehow tracked me to my workplace on a day when he knew Mom was visiting her sister in Rhode Island. You need to leave, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. There's a restraining order. Brandon's smile didn't reach his eyes. I just came to talk, Megan, about your trust fund. The mention of the money revealed his true purpose immediately. There's nothing to discuss. It's my inheritance from my father. Your mother and I have been paying for your upbringing for years. He countered, taking a step closer. We deserve compensation for those expenses. I stood my ground though my heart raced. Mr. Campbell has already explained that the trust is legally mine. You have no claim to it. Brandon's facade of calm slipped, his expression hardening. You ungrateful little. Is there a problem here? Mr. Peterson, the store owner, appeared beside me, alerted by another employee who had recognized Brandon from previous incidents. This man is violating a restraining order, I explained, keeping my voice even. Brandon seemed ready to argue, his face flushing with the familiar anger I'd witnessed so many times before. But something had changed, not in him but in me. Where once I would have cowered, anticipating the explosion, I now stood tall, unintimidated by his presence. This isn't over, Brandon warned as he backed toward the exit. The same words he'd used months earlier when the police had first been involved. Actually, it is, I replied with calm certainty. It's been over since the night I walked away. After Brandon left, Mr. Peterson insisted on calling the police to report the violation of the restraining order. I provided a statement mechanical and precise. I decided. He needs to understand there are consequences for his actions. The legal proceedings that followed were straightforward. Brandon received a fine and stern warning from the judge about future violations. More importantly, the incident provided documentation that would strengthen my case should further legal protection become necessary. I called Mom that evening to inform her of what had happened. Her immediate concern was for my safety rather than Brandon's legal troubles. A small but significant shift in her priorities. Are you all right? She asked, genuine worry in her voice. I am, I assured her, realizing the truth of it as I spoke. I really am. The day of my departure for Boston arrived with perfect late summer weather. Jessica's car was packed with the essentials for my new apartment. Clothes, books, the special quilt she had made for my graduation, and a few treasured photographs, including one of Dad and me building a sandcastle on our last family vacation. Our goodbye was emotional but not somber. This isn't an ending, Jessica reminded me as we hugged in the driveway. It's the beginning you deserve. Mom had asked to see me off as well, arriving with a small package wrapped in silver paper. Just something for your new place, she explained, handing it to me. The 5-hour drive to Boston gave me time to reflect on the extraordinary journey of the past year. From the terrified girl who had fled with $1 in her pocket to the young woman now driven toward a future rich with possibility. The contrast was so stark it seemed almost unreal. Yet every step of the path had shaped me, strengthened me, prepared me for what lay ahead. My apartment was small but bright, with windows that caught the afternoon sun and gleaming hardwood floors that creaked pleasantly underfoot. After unloading the car and arranging the basics, I sat on my new bed, my very own bed in my very own space, and opened Mom's gift. Inside the package was a framed photograph I'd never seen before. Dad holding me as a newborn, his expression a mixture of awe and absolute love. A small note accompanied the image. He would be so proud of the woman you've become. I am too. Love, Mom. My first night in Boston. I held the single-dollar bill I'd left home with, now framed as a reminder of both where I'd been and how far I'd come. The coming days would bring orientation activities, the start of classes, new friendships, and the continued work of healing. But in that moment, I felt a profound sense of arrival, not just at a physical destination, but at a place of understanding that transcended the pain of the past. I had learned that family is not defined by legal documents or shared addresses, but by those who protect, support, and nurture your growth. I had discovered that strength often emerges most powerfully in moments of greatest vulnerability, and I had come to understand that while some wounds may leave scars, they need not determine your future. My father's foresight had provided financial security, but the true inheritance he left was far more valuable: the example of his character, his belief in my potential, and the knowledge that I was deeply, unchangeably loved. As I prepared for my first night in my new home, I thought about the countless others facing situations similar to what I had endured, trapped in cycles of abuse, believing escape impossible, unaware of resources that might exist. I made a quiet promise to myself that once I was settled, I would find ways to volunteer with organizations supporting abuse survivors, particularly young people navigating the complex journey to safety and healing. The story of how I left home with just $1 wouldn't end with my personal triumph. It would become a resource, a testimony that might help others find their own path to freedom. Because the most important thing I'd learned was that no matter how dire circumstances might seem, possibility always exists, often in places and people we least expect. So I hung the picture of my father on the wall, placed the framed dollar bill on my desk as a daily reminder of resilience. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself against someone who should have protected you? Or found strength in an unexpected place when you needed it most? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Sometimes sharing our journeys helps others find their way forward too. Don't forget to like this video if it resonated with you and subscribe for more stories of resilience and healing. Remember, your past doesn't define your future. Your choices do. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you courage on your own journey, whatever challenges you might be facing.